We're coming to you from the DraftKings.com podcasting studios. DraftKings.com, America's one-day fantasy sports site, where it's like a new season every time you play. DraftKings.com.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Right Time. My name is Bomani Jones. Thanks for listening on ESPN Radio and the new ESPN app. I need you guys to understand something right now before we get knee-deep into this conversation, all right? I'm tired of talking about Robert Griffin, too. I really am. I've been engaged with all you guys in the social media space, and you're driving me crazy. You sound like morons, and I don't want to talk to you stupid people anymore about this Robert Griffin thing. I really don't. But, Shannon, we got together about an hour before the show and tried to figure out what to talk about, and
we're talking about Robert Griffin.
Yo, man, that's what we got. We were so happy when Trent Richardson got cut. Like, ooh, something to talk about. That's where we at right now, okay? Everybody's like, oh, man, I bet you're glad football season's going to come around and to give you more stuff to talk about. Where it at? Where's all the stuff? I don't see it. You seen anything?
I mean, we can break down quarterback competitions and depth charts if you want, Bomani.
No, but we can't even do that. You ain't watching them games. I'm not watching those games. I don't know who any of these people are. Like, if you need me to break down the depth chart, I got nothing for you. I can talk to you about these dudes I already heard of, but that's about it. I got nothing for you. But here we are. Robert Griffin, well, he hasn't actually been released yet, right? So we can save up all the stuff to talk about after he gets released when he actually gets released, because he's going to get released. You can bet that. You can't have him around. That's just too much. That's too much. I don't care if his name's on the lease or not. He got to go. Hey, that's it. There's no way around it at this point. He's got to go. He's going to wind up being gone, because the last thing they need is to have to throw Robert Griffin out there and he blow out his knee and they're on the hook for that $16 million next year. That is only guaranteed for injury, not for skill. So they're going to let him pass his little neurological test, assuming he hasn't passed neurological tests already. That was a little bit weird, wasn't it, when he was all good and then he was all bad? I mean, look, apparently his people have no problem with it. Like, they say the concussion was handled properly. I don't know how exactly that went down, but they seem to think everything went okay. All I know is he was the unquestioned starter, and then all he had was an injury, and then next thing we knew, Robert Griffin wasn't the quarterback anymore. And you're not going to tell me it's because Kirk Cousins just balled out against the Ravens. That didn't happen. It just did not, right? Let me tell you how narrow the margins are now, okay? I ask you this, Shannon. If Pierre Garçon catches that deep pass,
yeah,
and Kirk Cousins does not get that tip touchdown,
yeah,
that he had this weekend,
right?
Are we having the discussion that we're having right now?
No.
I don't think that's how thin it is. That's how stupid it is, by the way, to be clear. Like, you can logically hear what I just told you and understand how stupid that is fundamentally, okay? But either way, I got to hand it to the Redskins, man. Oh, see, accidentally said it. Sorry about that. I legitimately apologize for saying that offensive word. I don't think it's appropriate for the airwaves. Anyway, they ought to put together like a book, a little pamphlet, you know? Because I feel like, you know how people do self-help books? This is kind of the opposite of a self-help book. Right? But if you're going to have a self-help book, you got to have like a catchy title. People like lists. You see it all over the internet all the time. And they could put together one called 4 Easy Ways to Ruin Your Franchise Quarterback. That's right. 1. Number 1, you don't draft a franchise quarterback and then draft a backup in the same class. You just don't do it. Like, I've only really got one truly comparable situation to this, and I think some people will point to, like, Heath Schuler, Gus Frerotte, but Gus Frerotte was a 7th-round pick. Like, that's not the same thing. The one comparable situation I can give you was Troy Aikman and Steve Walsh, where, remember, the Cowboys took Troy Aikman number 1 in 89, and then they took Steve Walsh in the supplemental draft with a number 1 pick because Jimmy Johnson had coached Steve Walsh at Miami. And they ultimately moved him and got some picks for him by the time it was done. But the reason they did that was because Jimmy Johnson was not sold on Troy Aikman. And it did Troy Aikman no favors having this guy over his shoulder. But that was what the Orange did off the jump. We're going to draft Kirk Cousins, right? Robert's our quarterback, but. Problem was the head coach was never on board with Robert. So, and now the head coach is telling people that Kirk Cousins is going to be a top 10 quarterback in the league. Had you heard that, Shannon?
Funny how that works, huh?
Yeah, I don't know if Mike Shanahan's trying to get another job as a head coach, because that statement right there probably ends any chance that he ever had. But if you want to host a talk radio show, you well on your way, Playboy.
We knew when we drafted him that he was going to be a franchise quarterback. We knew it the whole time.
Yeah, that's why we have Robert Griffin running around on one leg until he couldn't run no more. All right, number 2. Don't bring in an older quarterback to mentor the young guy. Because why would you do that when you just drafted another quarterback in the 3rd round? Like, you get good players in the 3rd round. You get guys you can put on the field and make contributions in the 3rd round. They got this dude. All right, number 3. Treat your quarterback like a short-term option. Basically, play your quarterback like he's a running back, as if the first contract is the only contract that he's ever going to have. That's how you wind up doing things like sending your quarterback out to run seam routes in the NFL. That's how you have your quarterback out here on one leg running the read option. And number 4, hire a coach who absolutely does not fit your quarterback. Totally does not fit your quarterback. Now, that's not Mike Shanahan, to be clear. I still contend the best offense that you could have had for Robert Griffin is the Shanahan offense. A lot went wrong along the way, but I still think that was the best fit. Robert Griffin, if it stays together, Robert Griffin in that stretch bootleg game where you have to account for him on the backside of the formation every single time, whoo, that's a frightening thought if you're thinking about 2012 Robert Griffin, all right? So I don't blame him on that one. But when you get Jay Gruden, who when he was in Cincinnati preferred Andy Dalton to Colin Kaepernick, that's not the guy to coach Robert Griffin. Like, you know this off the rip. That's not the guy. But you know what wound up happening there? Jay Gruden had to take the only coaching job that he could get, and Washington had to hire the only coach that was willing to come. Like, that's what wound up happening, right? That's how you wind up with that dude and that team. How do they wind up together? Because who the hell else would want to be with either one of them?
Jay Gruden wasn't Mr. Right, but he was Mr. Right Now.
Mr. Right Now. Mr. Right. They got a 5-year contract out of it, too. That's how desperate Snyder is to hire a head coach. You had to give that dude 5 years.
Jay Gruden was the 2 a.m. let out.
Yes.
I got to get something.
Yeah, that's the 2 a.m. let out, and Snyder moved him in.
He flew him out.
Yeah. Like, look, man, I only got 3 more months on this lease. You might as well save a little money and come stay with me. I need somebody to help keep the house clean, right? Like, that's basically how that wound up. But in the end, when that 30 for 30 comes, and I am the director, I'm calling dibs on this, by the way, all y'all that's out here listening, I got the Robert Griffin 30 for 30. I've been planning on this for years. It's going to be those 4 easy steps that you point to. And we'll talk more about how exactly those 4 easy steps come together. But the big thing they did, you draft the dude's competition immediately. You don't bring anybody older in, because that's what Robert Griffin needs as much as anything else, is somebody that he'd be willing to listen to, right? You don't run your quarterback's leg into a nub, and then when it's time to hire a coach in year 3. Shannon, you realize they put Robert Griffin on the clock in year 3? The clock.
Wow.
Think about that for a second. One of the 10 best rookie seasons of all time.
Right.
The second year went about as you expect with a guy coming back from an ACL tear. Year 3 on the clock, where the new coach comes in and decides after a couple of days that I don't want to work with this guy anymore. Where do they do that? How does that work? Because it was 3 years ago that he was the biggest star in the history of that city. Now, Pro Football Talk did a poll, and the last time I looked at it, 66% of respondents said they thought Robert Griffin would be out of the league in 3 years. How in the world does that happen? How does that happen? It's a lot of ways.
Bomani.
Been talking about what happened with Robert Griffin and the team in Washington. It tells you the 4 ways that easy ways to ruin your cornerstone franchise quarterback. I'm going to hit you with a little game you might not have thought about, though. Okay? I can tell you one thing that Washington could have done that would have made everything so much easier for them as it related to Griffin. It's something that Dan Snyder should have thought about. It's something that Dan Snyder should have done, all right? Now, I have already established that they should not have drafted Kirk Cousins in the 3rd round. There was just nothing good that was going to wind up coming from that. And you could make the argument, well, now they have a quarterback since the Robert Griffin thing didn't work out, and I would say that they do not. I would say that they have Kirk Cousins. Like, I get very confused that every time we wind up in this situation, every time Kirk Cousins gets the job, it's a celebration of a fresh start. And everybody acts like they've never seen him play before. Like, in the NFL, in a real game, people act like they've never seen Kirk Cousins play before. Like, did you know Kirk Cousins played last year and got benched for Colt McCoy? Like, you think Robert Griffin's daddy is mad right now. Somebody call Brad McCoy. Brad McCoy got to be mad as he could be right now. Seriously. Like, how do you go to Kirk? How do you do that? He got benched last year. Colt got hurt. But, anyway, they could have sold high on Kirk Cousins because there's such a paucity of quarterbacks, and you could trick somebody else into taking a guy like Kirk Cousins. You know, Shannon, looks the part, ran a pro-style offense in college.
He's essentially a coach out there on the field.
Yeah, big, strong kid. You know, like, you could have done that. You could have sold high, right? But the thing that they could have done that would have been most conducive to Robert Griffin's success, and I imagine there are a few of you who are listening who are saying that the team shouldn't be so concerned with Robert Griffin's success. They should be concerned with the team's success. Robert Griffin's success was the team's success. Like, they were the same thing. Once you trade everything they traded away to get Robert Griffin, everybody's job has got to be, how do we get the most out of Robert Griffin? Because when you trade all of that to get a guy in the 1st round to be your quarterback, you're saying we don't even think there's a chance of him being a franchise quarterback. He is a franchise quarterback, and he looked the part when you first got him. Like, as soon as it got bad, all of a sudden people got shaky. But that was your guy. Like, everything needed to be all in on the development of that. There's no hedging on that guy when you invest what you've invested in him. That is your guy. And if that was going to be your guy, they could have traded Kirk Cousins away. And I tell you, the backup quarterback they should have gotten. They should have gotten Michael Vick. Shannon, why are you laughing?
All right, explain this one to me.
It's simple. It's really not difficult. Number one, a complaint that people have made about Griffin has been his lack of humility, right? Everywhere you hear people talk about his ego and how entitled he is and da-da-da-da-da and everything else, right? Who would be better to preach the cautionary tales of entitlement than Michael Vick? Who would be better to talk to about how you have to adjust your game because simply being faster than everybody else isn't going to be enough? Who could teach the perils of that situation more than Michael Vick? Michael Vick was in the same situation as Robert Griffin before it went bad for him. Everything was on him. Vick was 22 in that 2002 season when he took everything over and became the center, and that's just so much for somebody that's 22. There was no easing him into it, right? Griffin was the biggest star sports-wise that DC had ever had before he'd even taken a snap, basically. Michael Vick wound up in a similar place. Who would have been better to teach those pitfalls or to explain those pitfalls than Michael Vick? And something you got to remember about Michael Vick. Michael Vick is 35 years old now. We're at that point now where it's a league full of kids who grew up watching Michael Vick. And a lot of y'all got problems with the dogs, and I totally understand that. To a lot of guys, Michael Vick's the superhero that they had a poster up on the wall. Now, I don't know if Robert Griffin sees him that way because I get the feeling that Robert Griffin and Michael Vick, they don't kick it the same. They don't hang out with the same people. They don't know the same folks. But if anybody had a story to tell, it would be Michael Vick. All right? And then there's reason number two why they should have had Michael Vick as his backup. Because if Michael Vick's the backup, nobody's ever going to call for the backup. Nobody's ever begging for the backup to come in if it's Michael Vick. Not even when it was Kevin Cobb, Shannon. Vick just happened to come in because Kevin Cobb got hurt and then didn't give the job back.
Right.
But no. The people are not clamoring to see Michael Vick on the field. So Michael Vick would have been the backup. And you know what happens if you're Robert Griffin and you have a backup who's not a threat to you? You don't rush yourself back from an ACL injury because you think your coach really wants the other guy to be the starter in the first place. That's what you don't do when the backup is not brought in to be your competition. Because that's the beginning of everything with Griffin. He rushed himself back because he was looking over his shoulder. Not because he wasn't as good as Kirk Cousins, but because he knew what time it was with the coach that he had. He knew what time it was. And look how that turned out. But if you have Michael Vick behind him, it ain't none of that. Like, they couldn't have had him in 2012 because that's where you got, he's still making that big money in Philadelphia, right? But, like, by the time 2014 came around, a roster with as little talent as Washington's has, they could have got Cousins out of there for a halfway decent pick. They could have brought Michael Vick in there behind him. And tell me how last season would have been any worse. Tell me how they're in a worse situation right now if they got Michael Vick out there starting than with Kirk Cousins. Because guess what? They got to draft a quarterback next year. Kirk Cousins does not stop you from having to draft a quarterback next year. That's what they got to do next year. If they had Vick, nobody's trying to change the game. And maybe Griffin could have learned some lessons along the way. Just maybe. You thought that was going to sound crazy, didn't you, Shane? You thought I
was waiting. It made sense, though.
Makes sense. I mean, that's the place they got themselves into. It's right there. 888-729-3776. Let's hit the phone. Talk to Justin in Indianapolis. Justin, thanks for calling the right time.
Hey, thanks for taking the call, guys. I got my fantasy draft coming up this weekend. Just wanted to bounce an idea off of you. So our league, you keep 2 players, and you can trade draft picks. So I kept Dez and A.J. Green. And I'm looking at what I need to do with pick number 44. That's the one.
Well, let me ask you this. Is that pick 44? Have you looked into Bofa?
And I'd like to take Arian Foster at 44.
No. Is Bofa available?
Say that again, sorry.
Can you draft Bofa?
No.
Go ahead and let him off. I ain't even going to do it to him like that. I'm not even going to do it. This dude called me up about his fantasy draft. I don't give a damn about my fantasy draft. But Bofa, different story.
Bomani.
Best college football writer in the business. He's also an editor at SBNation.com. His name is Spencer Hall. Spencer, what's going on?
Nothing much. I understand you had to make a reference to the being overly foolish act.
Yes, we had a customer at Bank of America stop by and ask a fantasy draft question. And, I asked him if he might want to consider drafting Bofa, and he didn't really understand, and so I let him off easy. It's life, We're talking Spencer Hall, EDSBS.com. Now, you live in Atlanta. Please explain to me how the University of Georgia is going to have a starting quarterback who transferred from Virginia. Or maybe we're not going to talk about that either. Okay. We'll get Spencer back in just a second. That makes me feel a whole lot better, by the way, because I made a joke and I got silenced back, and that was really, really awkward. Like, I was like, how am I going to carry my own joke? And I decided I was going to do so by simply saying Spencer's name again, because then maybe he would wake up and start laughing so I wouldn't quite look so foolish. He'll be back in a second, but in the meantime, let's hit the phones. 888-729-3776. Talk to Kevin in Delaware. Kevin, thanks for calling the right time.
Bomani, how you doing? First of all, let me say I think that 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. daily time slot should be yours, hands down, my brother. I love your show.
Well, I appreciate that, but we don't get to make those kind of decisions around here.
Hey, you nailed the whole Robert Griffin thing. In my opinion, this thing has been a disaster since they drafted Kirk Cousins. I mean, why would you draft him as your franchise quarterback and then go out and bring in another quarterback right behind him to compete with him. From day one, he was never really their franchise quarterback, and he's been playing like that. He's been playing for his life since he's been in there. So I think from Shanahan to Gruden, they all have bottled this thing up. But the Michael Vick analogy was perfect, but he needs to just get out of here because they have abolished this thing from the beginning.
Wait, man, Kevin, I appreciate the call. And like I say, the only thing that really gets me about this Cousins thing is we've seen him play before. Like, I just don't understand, like, what this ceiling is that you believe that Kirk Cousins has, given the fact that you've seen him play before. Like, I've watched Robert Griffin play a lot. Like, I watch a lot of their games, although I'll admit I really only watch them when they have the ball. And I do because you knew a day like this was coming. Like, I wanted to be able to actually talk about the team as though I'd ever seen them play before, right? Like, not just looking at these box scores and coming at the end, but actually having seen them play. Griffin is not good. Like, there's no way around that. And it was the same kind of not good game after game after game. But it was always a not good that was better than Kirk Cousins. So, like, if you think the Kirk Cousins thing is going to get, like, you know, somehow you think 27-year-old Kirk Cousins has room for improvement that 25-year-old Robert Griffin does not, I just don't understand how. Anyway, back to Spencer Hall, EDSBS.com, also an editor at SBNation.com. I got you now?
Yeah, you got me.
Woo, that's fantastic. Now, I ask you this. As someone who lives in Atlanta, how in the world does the University of Georgia wind up with a quarterback who had to transfer away from Virginia?
Well, this happens because, you think the grocery store is never going to run out of eggs, and one day they're like, no, we don't have any eggs. Sorry, there's a shortage. Quarterback's an egg. And if you don't believe that, they get scarcer the higher the standards for the said egg go. In college, you can pretty much rely on those farm-raised grade A's, but in the NFL, you get to that point where you want your cage-free, gourmet, no-hormone, cruelty-free egg, right? And those eggs break pretty easily, as you were just discussing with Robert Griffin III. And that's how you end up with a law firm at quarterback, Grayson Lambert, which I could have told you was going to win the job because the thing I've been harping all offseason, besides this, that quarterbacks are hard to find, or two, that the quarterback who's going to win the position in the SEC is the one whose name works forward and backward. It applies universally, but particularly in the SEC. So Grayson Lambert, Grayson, he's probably got, like, great law school hair. He was the winner, obviously.
Well, also, look, we know that they're never going to move Mark Richt out of there, no matter what, right? Like, he's beloved. People will complain, but Mark Richt is always going to be the guy that's there. But if you're Mark Richt, do you want to roll the dice again on one of these quarterbacks that nobody actually knows who he is? Because was it Hudson Mason? Was that the guy last year? Hudson Mason.
Yeah, another example of my rule being totally accurate, by the way. Hudson Mason, kind of sounds like a law firm. He's a perfect UGA quarterback. This is what they're banking on. They're banking on Jeremy Pruitt growing that maturing defense into something that's going to be able to stand up with that run game and that offensive line. And then, maybe develop, a couple of younger guys along the way. The truth is that, Lambert won because he had playing experience. And that will trump pretty much anything unless the tape is absolutely horrid. And any other shortcomings that he might have had as a signal caller, he could come back and go, listen, I was playing for UVA. This is not UVA. I've got Nick Chubb behind me. We're going to be fine.
All right, talking to Spencer Hall of SBNation.com. Now, Ohio State starts the season #1 overall. I feel like that's happened a few times in my life. None of those times resulted in Ohio State winning a national championship. If something were to go wrong, what do you think it would be?
I think what would go wrong would be something purely psychological, which is not something small when you're talking about a bunch of 18 to 22-year-olds. It is not. Okay, it would have to be something psychological like, for instance, for their turnover margin to go upside down very quickly. Because this is not a team where you can say, well, maybe their quarterback will get hurt. Okay, well, if their quarterback gets hurt, we'll just play J.T. Barrett, right? Because that's what we're all counting on here is for Cardale to start and then J.T. Barrett to come along next year, and there'd be this sort of never-ending reign of Ohio Stateness over the Big Ten and over national college football in general. But that's not what happens. You have these games where there's 4 turnovers. You have these games where, you badly underestimate a team. You have your 2008 Ole Miss Florida game, right? A game that you have no business losing, which is usually like, a noon kickoff where you turn the ball over a bunch and where that other team gets 2 or 3 big plays that just kind of break you mentally. That can happen. there's nothing certain, and there's no one invincible in the sport whatsoever. So that's what would have to happen. I don't even think you need a key injury. I just think you need a couple of rogue waves, and you need the kind of things that just happen in college football programs all the time.
Well, you missed the big one, and that is what if Cardale Jones' girlfriend breaks up with him the night before the game, which is honestly enough to ruin a national championship season.
You know what? It's enough to ruin a lot. And you kind of underestimate those things, right? Like, usually when there's a game like that, you can go back and they're like, hey, man, there was a fight in the locker room. And you go, would that really do it? Yeah, that would do it. That will totally do it and mess up a team's chemistry just long enough for, I don't know, Purdue to go up 21-0 on you when you have no business letting that happen.
I have to say, though, Purdue ain't going up 21-0 unless
Nope.
the first half is for a day and a half.
Nope. Not in a day and a half, not in 2 days, not in a week.
All right, talking Spencer Hall of SBNation.com. Another thing that's fun, we've lived long enough to see TCU and Baylor be in the top 5 of the AP preseason poll. Like, that's happening. Like, I'm looking at it right now. It's directly in my face. Is it really crazy? I mean, they looked really good last year. It still feels insane to say that.
Well, I think anytime you get that going, it's usually indicative of a kind of power vacuum somewhere else. When you have 2 teams in the top 10 and you go, man, that's weird. Well, yeah, that probably isn't a good indicator for the overall strength of the conference or their region, right? Like TCU and Baylor being that good, well, who isn't good in the Big 12 who's typically good? Well, Texas and Oklahoma are a bit down. So it's very easy for them to sort of take some of the oxygen, take some of the recruiting power, and some of the shine away from these traditional programs. Remember, like in 1999, you had like Oregon and Oregon State. This one tiny state has, somehow put 2 teams in the top 10 nationally. You're like, yeah, that's because the rest of the Pac-12 was kind of in the dumpster at the time, right? Like USC had Paul Hackett as their coach. Or go back to last year. Like, it should have been a terrible sign for the overall strength of the SEC West. And you're like, man, Ole Miss and Mississippi State, they're right there. Yeah, that should have been foreshadowing enough to what was going to happen in bowl season. Because if we're being real honest about the balance of power in college football, Mississippi shouldn't have 2 top 10 teams.
No, something is terribly wrong. Like, these programs are powers for reasons, and the ones that are bad for reasons. And when they're not bad, it only means something happened. Like, maybe it happened in their way, maybe shenanigans, but definitely something happened.
Exactly. It's a lot like when there's a really great real estate market somewhere else because there's been an earthquake in the big city. That's usually what that means.
Especially want to do one more segment of this, man?
Sure.
We should do this. Okay, Spencer Hall of SBNation.com talking college football, and there's so much more college football to talk. The season really gets started this week, so we're going to do this.
Bomani.
Geico presents Strange Savings Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Welcome back to the right time. My name is Bomani Jones. Thanks for listening on ESPN Radio and the new ESPN app. We're talking to Spencer Hall of SBNation.com, EDSBS.com. We're talking college football, and Shannon and I, over the break, we're discussing this thing about Georgia, where if we are in a world where Grayson Lambert can be the starting quarterback at the University of Georgia, what exactly is that saying about the quality of the quarterback play in that conference? Because you always hear about how great the defenses are in the SEC, and they typically have more defensive talent than anybody else in the country. However, Shannon, those quarterbacks don't turn into NFL stars.
No, not at all. Playing against those defenses don't help these guys become NFL superstars. And in reference to Lambert, what does having a great SEC defense have to do with the fact that Grayson Lambert, a guy who transferred from UVA, what does that have to do with him becoming the starter at Georgia? Nothing.
Right, but it's also, I don't quite understand why that part of the country does not seem to produce quarterbacks, right? Like, I know why Texas produces quarterbacks. I know why California does. I don't know why that part of the country does not. So we got Spencer Hall back here with us, and we were asking this question about the SEC. Why does the SEC never seem to have the quarterbacks that you can find in other conferences?
Well, probably because of the emphasis on the passing game in other conferences. They're just teaching from a younger age, and you get people who just understand these things at a younger and younger and younger age, particularly in Texas, where 7-on-7 is so big. When you have 7-on-7 and you have these, very specialized and often very wealthy parents who are doing things like sending their kids to quarterback camp at an age that would probably stun you if you heard it, just younger and younger and getting more and more specialized training. And that goes for California, too. Remember Matt Leinart? Matt Leinart was getting private quarterbacking from coaching from a really, really young age. And for some reason, you just don't see that as much in Florida.
Well, it's funny because a friend of mine, he's an economics professor. He calls quarterback the new violin. He's like, this is, rich people send their kids to go get quarterback lessons like they used to send them to get violin lessons. And that's where the interesting part of the SEC comes up, where that is, the poorest part of the country that actually plays football. Yeah, and if you go and read Bruce Feldman's book on quarterbacking and on sort of the QB industry, which, by the way, has like a real, you should read it just for Trent Dilfer, just for the character that is Trent Dilfer. In that, it's absolutely amazing what goes into making a quarterback, just in terms of dollars, like the capital involved in taking someone and turning them into someone who could be, an elite quarterback. It's now getting to the point where it's well beyond just buying the violin and getting the lessons. It's an insane amount of money and time. All right, we're talking to Spencer Hall of EDSBS.com. Steve Sarkisian had a little bit of a rough week last week from what I hear. I was out of the country, but apparently I hear, he got a little bit loose with it. He needs 10 wins bad, like 11 wins bad this year, correct? 9. I put it at 9 before you start looking askance at him. And as always, it depends on how ugly those 3 or 4 losses that you're looking at, particularly when you're dealing with a USC team which still hasn't quite got the kind of depth and the kind of stability that you want in a roster overall. They're very lucky to have Cody Kessler. They're very lucky to have some playmakers. But beyond that, they can't lose badly to your Stanfords. They can't lose badly to teams that they would have thrashed pre-probation and pre-NCAA case. So, yeah, and this didn't help. It doesn't help to get up at, basically your team's barbecue and be a mess for whatever reason. Whether he says he took some meds that didn't mix with alcohol, that's a story and you got to believe it. That's still not exactly the best face to put forward. But others have pointed out, USC's pretty much been chaotic ever since pretty much the end of the Carroll era. Even under Pat Hayden, who's generally well-liked and considered to be this, very paternal figure, they've been a mess under him, too. Well, I feel like this with Sarkisian. If you're going to have a publicly drunk moment like that, get your money's worth. Like, it doesn't sound like he really, like Mike Price, he seemed to get his money's worth. Dana Holgerson getting kicked out of casinos. That's getting your money's worth. Yes. Gary Moeller back in the day from Michigan. Go and look at the details of that case. They are colorful and not to be repeated on radio unless you want an FCC fine. Yeah, I'd say if you're going to get like publicly drunk in front of people and endanger your job security, although unlike those other guys, Steve Sarkisian still has his job. I guess I should bring up. He should still have his job, but it's going to be real hard. You want to be real charitable. You want to be real fair. But when it comes time to do that 8, 9 wins, when you have other people that USC might want to hire, this is going to creep up in the back of someone's mind. All right, we're talking to Spencer Hall of EDSBS.com. What do you think about Florida State with Everett Golson? It seems weird because I didn't think it would be that easy because Jimbo Fisher's offense, remember you have people from the NFL going into the NFL said, yeah, the playbook here is simpler than it was at Florida State. But so I'm impressed. That's something to pull off. He's got Dalvin Cook back behind him, which is always nice. Your quarterback generally is going to be as good as the run game. The thing he's going to have to work on that really bothered him at Notre Dame was holding on to the ball and ball security. But if you look at that, I think even then he's set up for success a lot better than people might think because
Notre Dame's defense started faltering down the stretch with injuries last year, and that's when he started pressing, and that's when he started turning the ball over like crazy. So I think in a more balanced kind of offense, Everett Golson could have, I don't want to say kind of like a Russell Wilson-ish year, like Wilson had at Wisconsin, but he could definitely do a lot for his draft prospects. And they're going to need it because the defense and everyone else at Florida State, they're a bit inexperienced, and he's not.
He also won't have Brian Kelly in his ear anymore. Like, Jimbo's going to be there, but that ain't Brian Kelly.
I want to say this. It's going to be an offense that puts a little less pressure on him in terms of making a play. He's actually going to have outlets to throw the ball. If you watch Notre Dame's offense, it's a very effective offense, but it's one that puts a lot of pressure on the quarterback to make things happen.
All right, Dr. Spencer Hall of SBNation.com. How entertaining will Les Miles be this year? Because, I mean, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but they still don't have a quarterback, do they?
No. So this is like what, year 12? Year 12. No, I know they had Zach Mettenberger. That was like the last sort of prototypical, draftable, identifiable quarterback. You know, if you want to say Jordan Jefferson was a quarterback, technically I can't argue with you. At times he was, and at times he was Jordan Jefferson. And those were two very different things. He'll be very entertaining this year because, as usual, we'll have to vacillate between underestimating and overestimating LSU, i.e. maybe overestimating the amount of talent they have and underestimating the job that the coaching staff can do getting them ready, because sometimes they can look like a mess and sometimes they can come out for 2 quarters and absolutely flatten you. They're one of the slowest starting teams in college football sometimes. So they always keep you off balance, and they will never, ever let you make any decent set of expectations. I think this year, this is the year that they feel like a 7-win team. So, I don't know, pencil them in for the playoff.
You know, it's interesting also because last year I think we expected too much of Leonard Fournette, but realistically, what do you think they can get out of him this year, especially since Les might give him the ball 1,000,000 times, except, nope, he's got all those other guys he promised carries to.
Yeah, that's the LSU shuffle, right? That, you know, hey, we got Leonard Fournette. Well, that's cool. You got 3 other 5-stars right behind him, 2 of whom you'll watch their high school tape and go, my God, this is stepping in front of a bulldozer. Who would ever get in front of this? And you'll never see them. They'll get like 8 stunning carries a game, and then they'll just disappear. So, yeah, the usual bit of, you know, 5-star gumbo and complete mystery. So, yeah, it's another season in Louisiana. You'll have to finish the end, and even then you probably won't understand the plot.
By the way, apparently today he said that he drank too much coffee and the training staff advised him to go to the hospital. Les Miles, the most entertaining man in sports.
The mystery and the wonder that is Lester Miles.
Who has an economics degree from the University of Michigan.
No one can ever take that away from him. You know, like, you underestimate him. I bet he's really good at, like, Jeopardy. I bet he would sort of just stun you at one random game, one random kind of semi-intellectual game where he would absolutely thrash you. You know, like the tea game that they have at Cracker Barrel where you just have to, like, leave one tea? I bet he can do that in his sleep.
Hey, Spencer Hall, SBNation.com. I got to do this read and get this money. My man, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Bo. Thank you.
Shanny, you tired of talking about Robert Griffin yet?
Nope.
My thing is they slow-bled it, right? Like, they slow-bled it. It started over the weekend, a little bit come out, then a little bit come out. I've been saying the same things about Robert Griffin to people for the last 4 days. The same exact things. And they keep coming up. And you know why? Because people keep saying the same dumb things back to me. All right? Now, I want to get into the dumb things that people say to me, but first I want to address a question that a lot of people have asked me, which is, where do I think Robert Griffin should go after this? Like, where would be the best landing spot for him? And before the show, I gave my answer, and everybody laughed, but I was dead serious. He needs to go somewhere where he won't play. Simple as that. He needs to go somewhere where he will not play. You know why? Because one bad start could be his last one. And if you don't believe me, go ask Josh Freeman. Now, Josh got a whole lot going on with him that he needs to work out and get straight. But Josh Freeman, in his second year in the league, threw 24 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, I think it was. He threw 27 touchdowns in 2012. Against 17 interceptions, but he threw 27 touchdowns in 2012, and in 2013, he was playing for his job. And then he had that one start on a Thursday night with the Vikings when he barely knew the playbook. They said he had a concussion. He hasn't played in a regular season game since. okay? Keep in mind that Josh Freeman had the same stats basically his first 4 years as Eli Manning. Like, you go compare their stat lines in those first 4 years, they were effectively the same, okay? So where does Griffin need to go? Somewhere where we're not talking about him for a little while. Somewhere where we're not looking at him for a little while. You're too hot right now. Isn't that how they say it, Shannon? You're too hot right now.
We're going to need you to chill for a minute.
Yeah, he's way too hot right now. He needs to go somewhere else, because I'm not joking here. One more bad start could be the last start that he has in his career. And it leads to an uncomfortable question. And it's something that people have asked me a lot about. And over the years of Griffin, I've left this alone by and large. But now that we're at this point, it's fair to raise this question. Has there been a single black quarterback of any note and consequence for whom it has not ended something like this? Like, you can make the argument about Warren Moon, but the reason it didn't end like this with Warren Moon is because Warren Moon was a superhuman who could play until he was 147 years old. But I grew up in Houston, and I was there when they ran Warren Moon out. I watched the various stages of them try to run Warren Moon out. I remember when Warren Moon got benched in 1993 for a game against the Patriots for a gentleman named, I'm not even going to say the name yet because you can't even name who the dude is if you weren't around Houston. Benched him. Dude got hurt in that game. Moon came back. They won 11 straight, right? Now, that year, Moon was not playing well. But you know what he was? Warren Moon. That's who he was. You know where he is now? The Hall of Fame. And you know what Bud Adams did after that year? Traded him. You know what Bud Adams said when they retired Warren Moon's jersey? It's the one thing he looked back on and he regretted. Think of all the black quarterbacks of consequence that you could name. It seems to end like this for all of them. Disastrously bad, often at some point where you've got a coach that's not showing some level of support, and then at a point where you start seeing anybody out here getting jobs, those cats are on the radio somewhere. Now, with Griffin, there is no disputing that as of right now, he is not a good quarterback. No one's going to argue anything other than that. He is not a good quarterback. But every time you ask somebody to explain why it is that Kirk Cousins should be starting for Washington, basically all they tell you is because he's not Robert Griffin. We've seen Kirk Cousins play, Shannon. He's not good.
Right.
And I've heard the argument, well, he hasn't really had a chance. No, sir. He had a chance last year, and he got benched for Colt McCoy. He got those games at the end of 2013, and he did not play well. He's had chances.
Yeah, we've seen him enough. We've seen him enough to know what Kirk Cousins is. He's no longer a secret. He's no longer a question mark. We know what he is, and he's not great.
Where's the optimism coming from, right? And so the thing that throws my antenna up about this one as it relates to Griffin is, first of all, why do people just dislike him so severely? Number one, like there's a level of vitriol toward Griffin coming from people who don't even root for that football team. That is very, very difficult for me to understand, because just in 2012, he was everything you wanted him to be. In 2012, he was the guy that you wish Cam Newton was. Guess what? In 2015, you're looking at him like he's the guy you thought Cam Newton was.
Man, Robert, why can't you be more like Cam?
Right? That's where we are now. Like, that's the point that we've reached. But I ask everybody at every turn, what are your legitimate arguments for Kirk Cousins? Kirk Cousins, my man, I think it's Cyan. I don't know how to pronounce his name. C-I-A-N, Fahey. He covers a lot of football. He does a lot of the football nerd stuff, right, for Bleacher Report, Football Outsiders, like a lot of those sites. He says Kirk Cousins throws an interceptable pass 1 out of every 11. So what he does, he goes through and he charts the game and he watches every pass. And so passes that are like fluke interceptions are not counted as interceptable. You see what I mean? But, drop picks and stuff like that, they go in there. 1 every 11. By comparison, Griffin is 1 every 26. Now, Griffin's problem has been that he's gotten too cautious over the years, right? He completed 68% of his passes last year, but he didn't have the confidence to throw the ball down the field. Like, that is certainly a weakness and certainly an issue. But Kirk Cousins just isn't better. He just isn't. So I'll hear people say, well, Robert Griffin can't play in a pro-style offense. where's your indication that Kirk Cousins can? Like, the only indicator that you have that Kirk Cousins can play in a pro-style offense is that he's white and slow. But we've watched him play in pro-style offenses, and it doesn't go well. It hasn't gone well. He's 2 years older than Robert Griffin is. Where's the cause for optimism on this upper end? When Kirk Cousins got the job last year, you remember Washington Post did a whole spread about Kirk Cousins. Hey, Kirk Cousins finally got the job. They did a whole spread on the backup quarterback walking in a situation where there was injury. Today was treated in Washington like the beginning of a new day, like Kirk Cousins ain't been there the whole time. Like he hasn't been there the whole time that all of this has gone on. But I bring up the newspaper spread because they did that with Warren Moon too. Moon got hurt one game. Cody Carlson was starting the next one, and it was a spread in the Houston Post for Commander Cody. There was such an optimism. Why? Because he wasn't Warren Moon. And he wasn't Warren Moon in the ways that you don't want to not be Warren Moon. He was the opposite of a Hall of Famer, Cody Carlson was. But he wasn't Warren Moon. We just see this happen over and over and over and over again. So I'll never make the argument that Robert Griffin is playing well. I'll never make the argument that he's the quarterback for the next 10 years for Washington. Because it's clear that there are reasons to be concerned. But we wound up here because the franchise ruined the dude. And I don't see how you can make any argument against that. And people seem to be mad at Robert for that. So Robert Griffin says, I want to be a pocket passer. Every other mobile quarterback that's ever played in this league, we have pushed them to become pocket passers because we say you can't win the NFL unless you're a pocket passer. Who's the one that we've ever criticized for wanting to be a pocket passer? Why in the world would you ever do that, right? Now, with Griffin, you can make all the arguments about being injury-prone and everything else. The injury he suffered his rookie year was a fluke, because that's when his knee got hit by Haloti Ngata. That wasn't on a run play, by the way. His knee got hit by Haloti Ngata, and then they kept playing him until ultimately he wound up giving out. And then you look at him like he's crazy because he doesn't want to get out there and run anymore. Why? Because the last coach left him out there to run his leg into a nub. So put together the hostility that people have toward Griffin. Think about the ways that all the things that we always say about quarterbacks, we're not saying about him. And think about the fact that when you ask somebody why Kirk Cousins should be the starter, you can make an argument for Colt McCoy because he played pretty well last year when he got in there. Kirk Cousins got benched for Colt McCoy last year. Listen to the arguments that people make for why Colt McCoy should start, and all it basically comes down to is he's not Robert Griffin. So why would you be so concerned about having a starter when the only thing you can say about him is that he's not Robert Griffin? So I'm not saying that people are out here with pitchforks out here, oh, I hate black quarterbacks. No, I'm not saying that that's what's going on. And I don't think that people are necessarily consciously doing everything that they're doing. But you got to be able to look up and realize that, A, most of the things that people are saying aren't making sense. And B, this is going along the script that we've seen over and over and over again from black quarterbacks. I think you got enough there to make you stop and ask yourself exactly how the hell we wound up in this situation. You don't want to make a definitive judgment, that's fine. But I don't think I said a single thing right there that you're able to deny. Shannon, some guy on Twitter just said to me, you were 13 when Warren Moon played for Houston. Quit talking like you remembered when it happened. Ah, yes, because who remembers what happens when they were 13 years old?
Some of my fondest and worst sports memories happened when I was around that age. Come on now.
Oh, yes. Lonnie Smith fell down on the bases when I was 11.
Charles Smith couldn't make a layup.
Oh, he's still feeling that one, huh?
Oh.
How many times did he try?
4 times.
4 times?
6'10". Come on now. 4
times. Couldn't get the layup, huh? Couldn't make it happen. That's unfortunate. All right, 888-729-3776 is the telephone number. Now, I dared to broach the racial topic as related to Robert Griffin last segment. And I was just saying that this seems to be how it goes, the crash and burn for black quarterbacks. And when it's over, right? Like, Griffin doesn't need to go anywhere where they're going to rush him to play because every start he makes could be his last. But, Shannon, would you like the ultimate counterpoint on that? Like, that kind of drives home the point I want to make?
What's up?
In 1988, Vinny Testaverde threw 35 interceptions. In 1989, he threw 22 interceptions. You know how many more seasons he played after he threw those 22 interceptions in 1989? 18 of them. Vinny Testaverde was 37 years old and threw 25 interceptions. And he played 7 more years. Vinny Testaverde in 2004 was 41 years old and threw 20 interceptions. And he played 3 more years. And Shannon, in his last year, he started 6 games.
Was he with the Cowboys that year?
He was with the Panthers the last year.
Oh, that's right. He was with the Panthers.
He was with the Panthers that last year. By comparison, Aaron Brooks had that bad year with the Raiders at age 30 and never played again. Not everybody gets the same rope. And Griffin's at the end. Griffin didn't get rope coming off an ACL tear, right? Not everybody gets the same rope. So when he starts picking his situation, I'm sure he's thinking, I need to go somewhere where I can play. Oh, no. Think you need to go somewhere where they don't need to have you on camera. In fact, I recommend you wear your helmet with the shield on it all game long so they can't look at you. Like, people just need to stop thinking about you for a little while. You know, you have a tendency to rub people the wrong way. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. But if you want to keep doing this job, you might want to lurk in the back. Speaking of Robert Griffin, and the telephone number is 888-729-3776, Robert Griffin was taken with the 2nd overall pick in the 2012 draft.
Right.
Shannon, that draft is shaping up to look like the 1986 NBA draft. Now, these cats ain't, well, not all of them. They're not out here all strung out on dope and stuff, right?
Right.
Not all of them. But listen to this. So, Andrew Luck was number 1. I'd say that's going pretty well. Would you say that's going pretty well?
Yeah.
I'll say this for Andrew Luck. Last year, he finally got as good as y'all said he was the whole time. Like, now I'm on board with the Andrew Luck thing. I'd always been like, you guys are overreacting. No. Now I'm on board. All right. So, I knew he was going to be good, but I wasn't jumping the gun. So, he was the number 1 pick. That's gone well. Number 2, Robert Griffin, soon to not be playing for Washington. Number 3, Trent Richardson. Shannon, what happened to Trent Richardson today?
Yeah, he got cut by the Raiders.
I can't believe this.
By the Raiders.
Jim Brown told us he thought he was ordinary, right? And we called Jim Brown a hater. But we ain't called Jim Brown no hater to his face. Shannon, I bet you won't call Jim Brown a hater to his face.
Not at all.
You know what I call him to his face? Mr. Brown.
Absolutely.
That's it. I tell you about that time I called Jim Brown to get on the radio. I had Jim Brown on a radio show a few years ago, and I had gotten his number, and I cold called his house, and I asked him to come on the show, and I have never been more scared in my life because the last thing I needed was for Jim Brown to think I was playing on his phone. Can you imagine how not kindly Jim Brown takes to you playing on his phone? Sounds like you over there playing on my phone. Oh, no. Anyway, yeah, that was the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. All right, the number 4 pick in the 2012 draft was Matt Khalil. He was a Pro Bowler as a rookie. Nothing really been cracking after that. The number 5 pick in the 2012 draft was Justin Blackman. He fits the 1986 motif a little better, right, Shannon?
Yeah, he right in there.
Yeah. The 6th pick is Morris Claiborne. Shannon, he's the dime back now?
Yeah, he's out there playing nickel and dime corner at this point.
Number 7, Mark Barron.
Yeah, he's on his, second team, traded after, 2 years in Tampa?
Yeah,
in
number
Louis
8,
now.
Ryan Tannehill. Suddenly the shining light. Whoever saw that coming? Robert Griffin's about to get cut, and Ryan Tannehill just signed a $100 million extension. Those are the top 8 picks of that draft. That hasn't worked out well for just about anybody. In fact, the only team that this is really, really, really worked out for is the team that had the pick that was borderline impossible to mess up. The Colts really couldn't mess that pick up. They were taking Andrew Luck. That was that. Everybody else had options. And it doesn't look like they made the right ones. Not at all.
But you asked me a question off air. Why does it seem as though so many people get pleasure or take pleasure out of Trent Richardson's failures?
I can't figure it out because he hasn't done anything to anybody. Remember, he was in school. He took the girl with cancer to the prom. You remember that? That's a good guy. I have nothing, though. People really take great joy in Trent Richardson not being good. And I can't figure it out for the life of me. he's not the first guy to ever wind up in a situation like this. I will say this, though. He's cost a lot of other running backs money because nobody's ever getting taken that high as a running back ever again. And it seemed like a good idea at the time. Like, I think people are being awfully revisionist about Trent Richardson when they say, about him being bad now. I don't think any of us really saw that coming. At the very least, we thought he would be steady. Dude, he can't hit a hole to save his life. And he taught me, like, how thin the margins are in the NFL. Because I'd be like, how come when he in the game for the Colts there are no holes, but somehow Donald Brown is finding places to go? Because Trent Richardson just wasn't hitting the holes. Like, the holes aren't that big. They don't stay open for long. He couldn't get to them. He got used to running through those gaping chasms at Alabama. And then the other part. Go play running back for Nick Saban in the SEC, and let's see how good you feel when you get done. Those are a lot of miles those boys take in college, and they take those miles for free. That's why the running backs never stay 4 years, because you can't take those miles for free. And when we start wondering why Trent Richardson doesn't hit that hole with that same pace that he had at Alabama, he's taken a lot of hits since he left Alabama. It matters.
Bomani.
And now, for Geico's edition of Stuff Found in Your Car, we go inside your side door pocket.
Hello, yes, the crumpled receipt with gum in it. From your anniversary dinner, you sprang for expensive wine, your server was Beth. That dinner was a couple $100. Money you could get back if you switched to Geico and saved hundreds of dollars on your car insurance. I bet you'd save that receipt. Frame it even. But really, where did I go wrong? Was it the corkage fee?
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com today.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Right Time. My name is Bomani Jones. Thanks for listening on ESPN Radio and the new ESPN app. He is a writer for ESPN Magazine. He is also guest hosting on Around the Horn all this week. His name is Pablo Torre. Pablo, what's going on?
Tony Reale is, I believe, in Northern California. I think he's touring wineries or doing something that involves breathing fresh air. That is the opposite of the Las Vegas-like atmosphere of our Times Square studio. But yeah, that is what I'm doing. So anybody who's angry on Twitter, just know Tony Reale's on vacation. I'm just stepping in because I want to let my guy go on vacation.
Hey, the real teacher said I'm supposed to get 15 points to start the show on Wednesday. When I get there.
If you can get a permission slip, you can notify that, you can notarize that. I'm happy to consider this thing.
He left a note. I mean, there should be a note there, like right on the desk. There should be a note about my 15 points. I guess he must have just forgot. But go ahead. You can talk to him after we get back about it. It's cool. We're talking to Pablo Torre of ESPN the magazine. Tell me this: did you think you lived long enough where Peter King would write a story that involved discussing a trailer for a movie about the doctor who's basically been blackballed from his profession for his research on concussions in the NFL?
Not only did I not anticipate that, but let's not bury what to me is the lead here, which is Will Smith is playing this man. Now, you can have many different thoughts about Ali and his performance in that, and that's a whole valid conversation. He's doing an accent in this movie. He did an accent in Ali. There's going to be some interesting comparison there. But I think the lead is if you're the NFL and your job is to be part of the general counsel's team that basically tries to anticipate what's the worst, by that I mean, what's the most inconvenient version of this movie that could exist? Will Smith is probably easily top 3 in terms of male leads you could cast as Dr. Bennett Omalu, the famed West Virginia neurologist doctor. The Rock's probably up there. I don't think he would get the role, but Will Smith, man, that is right. That is right exactly where you don't want this movie to go if you're the NFL.
Hold on. The Rock as neurologist. What do we have to do here?
Think about it. If you're the NFL, The Rock, who touches all these demographics, who I follow The Rock on Instagram, and I at first followed him ironically, man, The Rock, I'm just consuming this hashtag brand sort of a human being, but The Rock is he's charismatic. He's charming. You know, he would be the guy. He's a former player. Like, if The Rock turned on the NFL and played this neurosurgeon, that would be, I think, the worst version of this scenario.
All right, we're talking to Pablo Torre of ESPN, the magazine, but I'm curious to see a movie about that doctor. And if you get a chance, look up the story. He did all this research, and then his life got really, really hard. It's like the ultimate man versus machine sort of story in real life. How many people are going to go see that in theaters, Will Smith or not?
Yeah, I don't know. But then again, though, like, I'm bad at, like, the movie attendance algorithm, it turns out, because today, actually, I was reading I think it was like the Hollywood Reporter or something, and it reported that the Zac Efron movie about EDM, where he's a DJ, was like one of the worst 10 box office openings of all time for like a widely released movie. And if you were to come to me beforehand and say, how many people do you think are going to watch a Zac Efron-led movie about EDM where he's a DJ, knowing exactly how much money is in that industry, I would have told you it would have been successful. And it was one of the top 10 least most successful movies of all time. So to me, how many are going to see this movie on opening weekend? I would tell you the NFL is the NFL, so the brand has that saturation, but it's about like medicine and science, and I don't know if that outside of the like we're going to space genre has really been so successful.
Well, I also wonder this too. When in that movie is Will Smith going to fight some aliens or, like, break out a Uzi? Because that's really the only kind of movies he does. Or, well, I guess I was about to say, or is he going to turn out to be homeless? But as we said, things haven't gone so well for our brother, the neurologist.
No. I mean, Dr. Bennett Omalu, though, if you're Dr. Bennett Omalu and you get this call, do you submit a list of people who you're like, I'd like you to consider these people to play me? Or do you just sort of stay out of it? Because it's kind of the most defining thing about your life from now on is that you were the guy that was played by Will Smith.
But at the same time, people are then going to meet you in real life and be like, Will Smith don't look nothing like you. Like, this is not quite this isn't quite on the level of Russell Crowe in A Beautiful Mind playing John Nash as being just terribly implausible as it relates to real life. But it ain't like that far. These are two different dudes.
Yeah, that is a great point. He looks nothing like this guy. And also, I mean, yes, in terms of like the authenticity of cinematic depictions, like the guy who played Stephen Hawking in that movie that came out last year, like pretty good job. Brad Pitt, by the way, is Billy Beane. We kind of got over that. We kind of let that go because Billy Beane is kind of like he's objectively some measure of like he's a handsome guy, but beyond that, Brad Pitt, that's an order of magnitude well beyond that. I would say that it's like 3 orders of magnitude between Will Smith and Dr. Bennett Omalu, purely physiologically. But Will Smith played Muhammad Ali, and people seem to buy that too. So, you know, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, he gains a way to do that. Russell Crowe was playing John Nash. Like, he must have been working out those math problems with like a 50-pound pen. Like, that's the only way. You can't get that swole and be that good at math. There's just only 24 hours in a day.
There needs to be a list of the most implausibly handsome cinematic depictions or whatever, muscular, physically imposing, like the cinematic PEDs, because, yeah, that I think might be number one. I mean, are we counting like Charlton Heston as Moses? Because I don't think that's really a nonfiction to fiction kind of a translation. I would read that listicle.
Look, they tried to sneak Zoe Saldana on us as Nina Simone, which is perhaps the most disingenuous casting of all time. Like, we're just going to take away everything that makes you Nina Simone because people love a pretty girl. We are talking to Pablo Torre of ESPN, the magazine. Did you pay any attention to this Kobe Shaq podcast?
You know what? I will tell you this. I've consumed it exclusively via Twitter, and I feel like it would be in my wheelhouse if I invested time in it, but it's basically therefore in the Friday night lights of my life. I know I would like it, I think, but I just don't have the time because I am doing other stupid things. But did you listen to it? Because I didn't catch up with it at all.
Nah, I didn't listen to it. I think I did it the same way. I just want to know why it is people just can't leave Dwight alone. Like, Dwight's name always got to come up in everything. Dwight Howard played through a torn labrum and led the league in defensive rebounds. I think total rebounds that season. And everything is just about what a terrible dude Dwight is.
Do you think that Dwight would get that if he was 6'5"?
That's an interesting question.
I feel like he fits this profile of like the lumbering brute in a way that's kind of a throwback. Like he is Goliath, even though mentally and personality-wise and psychologically he clearly is a child. Like he is clearly a psychological David, but he is a physical Goliath, and I feel like people hold that against him.
But it's interesting because he's not even really Goliath because he might be the shortest center in the NBA.
Here's the thing. That is always a valid caveat when it comes to talking about Dwight Howard, that he's actually like 6'9" or something. But his just like physique is I think it's the most caricatured version of a human body that exists in sports. I would say that.
Well, he's also, you can make an argument that the only person who could like relate to Robert Griffin's pain right now would be Dwight Howard, in the sense that there was a time that everybody loved Dwight Howard, and then the things that they loved him for, they now hate him for.
Yeah, no, when you have like this weird, like in the Steve Jobs biography, they call it like the reality distortion field. Like you can take that in many different, I think, connotations, good or bad. It tends to look more like genius and more palatable to people when things are going good. When it's not, you just look deranged. Like that's the thing about being a weird person who has a personality that really, I guess ego is the most close synonym, but just having this field around you where you're like kind of a character, like Robert Griffin III, who I honestly, I mean, like I go back with him. I interviewed him when he was at Baylor, all that. And I bought so much stock in the guy, but one of the things that was clear from early on was that not only was his nickname Black Jesus at Baylor, among many other nicknames, but he actually was somebody who had done no wrong. Like he was bad at nothing. I remember the conceit of my story being, I'm trying to find a weakness with RG3, and I do not see one. And now, obviously, that looks very naive. But at the time, it was just like he had the academics. You know, he was this Olympic. Just people. I hope people remember that if we lose him in the way that we eventually lost, like Bo Jackson, like there is a magnitude to his talent that was never realized.
Well, there was a weakness, Pablo, and it was that damn hair. Like, if you wanted to know what the weakness was, all you had to say was that he was still out here looking like Terrence Trent D'Arby. That's all it had to be, you know? It would fall right in line. Terrence Trent D'Arby once said that he was going to put out a record that was going to be the best thing since Sgt. Pepper, and it proved to be a disappointment, and you can make an analogy about Robert Griffin in that way. But Pablo Torre, ESPN, the magazine, he's guest hosting on Around the Horn this week. My man, thank you so much.
Of course.
Bomani.
Let's hit the phone. Talk to Craig in Indianapolis. Craig, thanks for calling the right time.
Yeah, man, I wanted to speak on that Robert Griffin III, man. First off, I love your show, man. You speak on topics that a lot of other people are scared to touch. That's one thing. Keep it real. Keep on talking about it. But I believe the franchise should be to blame for his downfall, man. Because I'm sitting at home the first year when he got injured, and I'm thinking, man, they need to pull him out that game. If they're looking for him to be a franchise quarterback, they're going to look for what's best for the future, not just right now. They was trying to win that game, man. They was trying to see how far he can get them. But if they had so much confidence in the backup they got right now, man, he was in there. They should have pulled him out when he was hurt and put their backup in there, and they could have saved all this trouble that they're having now because he wouldn't have that injury like he have now, man. And I believe it just never did heal right.
No, I think that's a big part of it, man, and I appreciate the call. Now, one thing about it was, though, no matter what, Snyder wanted Griffin to play. Like, that's what it was. And I have to say what I think is a bit crazy about the Snyder thing. Because I think the worst thing to happen to Griffin that we don't talk that much about, his biggest ally is the guy that we trust the least. Right? His biggest ally was the owner. That's not the ally that you want to have. And people act like it's crazy, the idea that the owner would have a player that he likes that much. That happens all the time. That happens with the quarterback all the time. When Jim Mora got out there and did that playoffs rant, you remember that?
Playoffs?
Right. You know what the root of that was? Peyton Manning, in the midst of a bad fourth season, having a bad game. And when Jim Mora did that, we knew all instantly at that moment that Jim Mora was never going to coach that team again. in part because you wasn't about to be out here bringing the blues to Peyton Manning like that in public. And nobody's done a thing like that since, as far as I can tell. Right? Jim Irsay loves Peyton Manning. We saw everything, how close their relationship was and da-da-da and everything else. That's how that goes all the time. That is not a rare thing. And if you own the team and y'all traded all those first-round picks to get Robert Griffin, he'd damn well be out there playing. Like, in this case, Daniel Snyder's the one that's making sense. It just so happens to be that he's Daniel Snyder. Like, really, what is unreasonable about being the owner of a team that traded all that to get that franchise quarterback and then saying, okay, but you guys have to play him? In what other situation would you ever consider not playing him?
That's like working a job the whole summer to save up for some new kicks to wear on your first day of school. You best believe I'm wearing these on the first day of school.
And I just might wear them on the second. But in any other situation, any other thing like that, the money talks and Griffin plays. It just so happened that this was the situation where we look at it like, well, maybe he doesn't deserve to play. I think we should give Kirk Cousins another chance. We just act like them other chances that he had before never, ever, ever happened. I need that to happen in my life. Like, can I go out there? Can you find something that I can just go? I mean, people might say the radio, but something I can just go out there and be bad about, just be bad at. And then every time I try it again, they're like, well, you know what? It's another chance for Bo. Because it'll never work like that for me. 888-729-3776. Let's talk to Ralph in D.C. Ralph, thanks for calling the right time.
What's going on, Bomani?
Doing all right,
How you
man?
doing, Shannon?
I'm doing well.
I went to high school in Washington, D.C., and they had a Native American tribe come in and, teach us about Native Americans and about how everything goes down in their tribe. And they said something funny about putting a curse on the Washington Redskins franchise. And I started to think a lot of people that ended up playing with the Skins and then ended up leaving had a great NFL career. And then how funny would it be if Robert Griffin III ends up leaving the Skins and he goes to, let's say, like the Eagles, and he does great? That will haunt the Washington franchise forever, man.
No, you're right about that. I appreciate the call. Now, I would like to make the argument that if there was going to be a curse put on that team, they wouldn't have won those 3 Super Bowls. I would also make the argument that, like, the Native Americans, if they were the ones to put the curse on the Washington franchise, that would certainly be possible. But, Shannon, given the track record of George Preston Marshall way back in the day, I feel like a whole lot of other people be putting curses on them, too.
You would think so.
Like, they got 3 of them, man. Life just ain't fair. Like, that's how that goes. They have 3 of those rings. Life simply is not fair. That's it. But I would say this. I've heard a lot of people make the argument that they think that Griffin would be a good fit in Philly, and I think that basically the presumption is it's a spread offense. He ran a spread offense in college. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention, but the quarterbacks that Chip Kelly was using at Oregon, he don't use them in the NFL. He's got a roster full of dudes that none of us would have thought that he would have had as his quarterback at Oregon. Like, up and down the depth chart. He went from Michael Vick to Nick Foles, and he never looked back. Except for Tebow, which is just, they haven't fired him yet.
No, not yet.
Come on, man. We need college football season about to start. We need you on the SEC network, baby. Come help us with our coverage. Because he seems to still be having trouble figuring out the coverages over there. 888-729-3776. Let's talk to Amanda in Oklahoma. Amanda, thanks for calling the right time.
Hi. Thank you for having me. I was calling about what you said about Robert Griffin rubbing people the wrong way. Well, I'm one of those people that he rubs the wrong way, and I think I know why. He came into the league with a big head, a cocky attitude, and then after he got back from being injured, he comes in just acting like that was nothing, and he acts like he's going to come back and win the Super Bowl after his injury, and then he comes back and bombs and gets hurt again, and he hasn't done good since his rookie year. So we're still waiting for the big cocky Robert Griffin III that says he can go out there and be the best, and we haven't seen it since his rookie year.
Amanda, I appreciate the call. Shannon, that sounds like hating to me. Does it sound like hating to you?
Just a bit, yeah, it does.
That's the one thing about it. Like, if your problem with athletes and them being cocky, you need to start watching something else. Like, they all are. That's how it works. That's how this goes.
Hey.
Let's start keeping that on deck again.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones. Weeknights from 9 to 11 Eastern or on demand at ESPNradio.com.